Rumor has it the Sacramento Kings are very high on Gonzaga big man Chet Holmgren, who's not expected to make it past the second overall pick in this year's draft. Of course, the Oklahoma City Thunder own the second pick. The Kings own number 4. Would the Kings be willing to move up to number 2, and how much would they be willing to give up to make that jump? On today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast, I'm joined by Frankie Cartoscelli from Sports 1140 KHTK and the Return of the Roar podcast. We'll talk about the possibility of the Kings moving up to number 2 and Chet's fit here in Sacramento. We'll talk about Jaden Ivey. We'll talk about Keegan Murray. We'll talk about Monte McNair's job security going forward and the importance of whoever the Kings draft fitting alongside De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis. It's all on today's episode of Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all regular season and all offseason, presented by BetOnline. BetOnline as you cover this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I currently work for ABC 10 News in Sacramento. And of course, with this being draft season, believe it or not, we're only 2 weeks and some change away from the draft, but that's still a lot of time for things to change, a lot of time for us to have further conversations about this draft, whether you have locked in the guy that you want at number 4 or not. More and more information is going to come out. More and more rumors are going to swirl. And one of the latest rumors surrounding the Kings, actually, it's been around for a little bit, but we're really addressing it heavily for the first time here on Locked On Kings, is the idea that the Kings are interested and maybe even actively or pursuing trying to move up to number 2 overall in order to acquire Chet Holmgren. In so many ways, Chet makes a lot of sense for the Sacramento Kings. The Kings have been looking for a front court partner with Domantas Sabonis who can 1, space the floor, check, and 2, help with protecting the rim. Check. A natural 7-footer, arguably one of the best defenders in this draft. There are some concerns about Chet with his overall weight and lankiness, of course, but there's a lot of reasons to like why Chet could fit in Sacramento. So it makes sense that the Kings could potentially, allegedly, according to rumors, be interested in Chet, to have him high on their board. If they had their choice of the top 3 to slide to number 4, it wouldn't surprise me at all if Chet was their number 1 guy. If they had the number 1 overall pick in this draft, it wouldn't surprise me at all if they would take Chet with the first pick in the draft. Unfortunately, they have number 4, which means that they're not going to get Chet. Chet's not falling to him at this point in time, or at least we can be surprised. Things can happen. I would not put my money on that happening. If the Kings really love Chet, if they really want Chet, they're going to have to make a move. We've talked a lot about the potential of the Kings trading down in this draft. We've talked about Jaden Ivey or Keegan Murray or Shaedon Sharpe, the guys that are expected to be there at 4 and how they could fit with the Kings going forward. But we haven't explored too much of the Kings moving up to number 2 to get Chet. What would that take? How much would they have to put on the line? How much of the future of the Kings would Monte McNair, Kings general manager Monte McNair, have to risk in order to pull off this move, especially when Monte's future is uncertain as well, because he's only got 1 year left on his general manager contract here in Sacramento. He has not yet been signed to an extension. A lot of questions surrounding this potential move. It's just the latest in the many branches of where the Kings can go in this draft. Whatever branch they choose, whatever road they choose, they have to get it right. Very excited to have Frankie back with me. Frankie Cartoscelli from Sports 1140 KHTK back with me here on Locked On Kings. It's been a while since I've had him on. We, of course, are going to talk about the idea of the Kings moving up to get Chet Holmgren. We actually start our conversation, though, talking a lot about Jaden Ivey, who Frankie is very high on. And I know a lot of you are also high on Jaden Ivey to the Sacramento Kings. Enjoy that. We'll talk about Keegan Murray. We'll talk about Monte McNair, a little bit about Shaedon Sharpe as well. Please enjoy my conversation. Feel free to respond to anything Frankie and I discuss. You can follow me on Twitter and comment on Twitter at MattGeorgeSack. You can email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com, or leave your thoughts in the YouTube comment section down below. But enough of my blabbing. Here is my conversation with my friend, Frankie Cartoscelli. Just over 2 weeks away from NBA draft night, and we still have absolutely no idea what the Sacramento Kings are going to do. Honestly, that's the way it should be, and things might change a million times between now and the draft on the 23rd. You know who I like, Keegan Murray, and I'm excited to bring in my friend Frankie Cartoscelli from the Return of the Roar podcast, also with Sports 1140 TK, does a phenomenal job covering the Sacramento Kings there. Frankie, recently you tweeted out that your pick right now at number 4 for the Kings is Jaden Ivey. Tell me why.
Well, Matt, again, thanks for having me on, my friend. It's always great coming on here with you and talking about this great team that we spend our time covering. But well, you know,
always great.
Always good enough times we can have. Yeah, right now, I mean, things are pretty fluid with the draft, as we all know. And unless you spent the season watching a lot of college basketball or covering college basketball out there, to other writers out there, but for most of us, we're laymen. Like we're trying to figure this out as we go with college basketball. And I've kind of dove into Jaden Ivey's game film. And I think that he's a guy, you hear people kind of clamoring for the Donovan Mitchell trade. The Kings should go get Donovan Mitchell. They should go trade for him. That'd be great. I mean, that'd be awesome. But what I'm looking at in Jaden Ivey is they're kind of a similar player. They kind of have similar numbers in college. Their play styles are very similar. Donovan Mitchell wasn't necessarily a point guard in college. He was a shooting guard, but he would obviously bring the ball down in a lot of sets. He was their best player. Jaden Ivey, kind of similar situation where he's a guy that I think people have concerns about his fit with Fox, but the way I see him is a guy that can be an off-ball threat and isn't someone who will need to be used the same way Tyrese Halliburton was with De'Aaron Fox, which was pretty much the issue. As far as the Kings need a bucket getter, and that's exactly what I think Jaden Ivey can do. He's a guy who's very athletic. His shot still remains to be seen how well he can shoot the basketball. But I think he's young enough to where you can work with him as he goes. And the fact that he can create in and around the paint really just speaks volumes to what he could bring to this Kings team. But to bring it all together, I think he's a guy that's he's a very high ceiling. So the Kings need to strike gold in this draft. And I feel like they have a good chance of striking gold with him. Who knows the draft? We all know it takes about 2-3 years to figure that out, really. But it's just what my gut's telling me right now.
It's really interesting because I've the loud comparison for Jaden Ivey is John Morant. Like a lot of people say, oh, it's just John Morant potential, this explosiveness, this energy, this athleticism that he plays with. And I understand that comparison too, but I have seen a lot of sneaky comparisons to Donovan Mitchell with his ability more to play off the ball. And of course, there are questions. If Donovan Mitchell were on the Sacramento Kings, I would be thrilled. However, there would be natural questions about his fit with Fox. Although at that point, I think the Kings are picking anything Donovan Mitchell over anything De'Aaron Fox, not trying to fire shots. That's just, I think, the reality of the situation. So I'm not necessarily saying that Jaden Ivey can't work with De'Aaron Fox based off of what Fox and Tyrese Halliburton had in the past. What I'm concerned about a little bit with Jaden Ivey is, and maybe I'm off base here, and maybe you feel more confident about this, the incorporating Jaden Ivey into what the Sacramento Kings are doing and how much time that is potentially going to take when the window for the Sacramento Kings is winning right now. However, at the same time, that's a lot of expectation to put on a rookie. If you can bring Jaden Ivey in off the bench and he is a instant explosive offensive threat that can provide that with the second unit, he gets spot minutes at times with De'Aaron Fox, and you start someone like a Davion Mitchell or a Dante DiVincenzo, well, then maybe that's the route for the Sacramento Kings to go. As long as the Kings are winning, it doesn't really matter what the lineup looks like. But how long do you think it is necessary for a rookie like Jaden Ivey, who has this ceiling, to reach that ceiling or to start to accomplish that when the Kings are in pretty much a win now mode, it seems?
Well, that's the question, right? I mean, the Kings need a guy who is going to come in and be a difference maker from the moment he laces up for game one. And I think with a player like him, who is an athletic guard, I feel a little stronger about than bringing in. It's not often we see, like, Evan Mobley was a really good player this year. The bigs usually take a little longer to kind of find their footing,
Mhm.
whereas guards usually take off quicker in the NBA. But Monty's need to be sure because of that very concern, Matt, with how long is it going to take? Because the Kings need someone to come in and make an impact immediately because we have Sabonis has 2 years, Fox is 4. So, and then you have Mike Brown on a 3-year deal. Monte McNair has 1 year on his contract. Someone needs to come in and be a difference maker out the gate. And I believe Jaden Ivey could be that player. Now, I will say that the player that I want the Kings to draft and the player that the Kings will draft, they might not line up because of that very reason right there. Maybe Monte McNair sees that a Keegan Murray or AJ Griffin, Benedict Mather. I mean, there are people that Monte McNair, I would not be surprised if he says, hey, I want to bring in a guy who plays a little more defense and can help us with some of those more pressing needs immediately rather than a guard, where I understand that too, because the Kings do want to probably retain Dante DiVincenzo, who they went out and traded for twice. They do have Davion Mitchell, who was impressive in his last 10, 15 games as a starter. And they have Terrence Davis in the roster, and then also Justin Holiday, but we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, they're going to need someone that's going to come in and be a difference maker out the gate. That's what this 4th pick is all about. It's so important. And we saw what happened with the number 2 pick. And this isn't that same situation entirely, at least not on the surface, as we know of right now. There's no Luka Doncic type player available at 4 that's going to set the Kings back, I don't know, 10 more years. But it's going to come down to Monte McNair having to answer that question. How long will it take to integrate this rookie into hopefully winning basketball?
The ceiling for Jaden Ivey, I 100% agree, and everybody's talking about how high it can be. And I know high ceilings are, especially when you have like the 4th overall pick, it's very enticing, and a lot of people latch onto that. But you also have to look at floor. And in your mind, where is Jaden Ivey's floor in the NBA? Is he pretty much a can't miss in the sense that he's going to be a solid NBA contributor and have a solid NBA career? Is that floor lower than, say, a Keegan Murray in your mind, or at the same level, maybe higher?
With the bigs, I was telling Chris Watkins, my coworker, my buddy, friend today, I'm a little scarred from the Thomas Robinson experience. And I'm not saying Keegan Murray's Thomas Robinson. They're different players and it's completely different players. It's just when I think about just a power forward type player like that, it's just, I'm scared. But I was big on Keegan Murray when the Kings were going to be 7th. And then I've kind of shifted it towards 4th with Jaden Ivey. But I mean, in a hypothetical scenario, if the Kings were picking 7th, I'd be all over Keegan Murray. And I still would be okay if they draft him. But back to your point, who has kind of the lower floor or higher ceiling, I guess. I think that Jaden Ivey, his floor, I mean, the last guard that kind of came in and was like a top 5 pick and didn't really pan out in a comparable, like Chris Dunn never really turned out that well. I mean, I think he'd be better than Chris Dunn was, who's still in the NBA. And I think he was even on a roster last year with, was it Atlanta? I can't remember who it was, but he didn't play very much last year. I think he'd be enough to be a rotation piece. Like, that's his floor. His ceiling, I think all-star talent. Like, I really think that he's an all-star talent at his ceiling. The comparisons of John Morant, the comparisons of Donovan Mitchell, that's what is enticing to me to bring in a player who could be that number 2 option or become a number 1 option in that backcourt, De'Aaron Fox, that they've always needed. We thought Tyrese Halliburton could do that, but it turns out Tyrese Halliburton needed the ball as much as or a little more than De'Aaron Fox to really be his best version of himself. And that's something that Kings fans will be bummed out for a while to see if that would have worked out. It maybe it would have, maybe it wouldn't have, but I think De'Aaron Fox is still looking for that backcourt mate. We've seen Buddy Hield go, Tyrese Halliburton. Could Davion Mitchell be that guy if the Kings do choose to draft a 4 or a 3? That's a question that needs to be answered as well this offseason. But I'm more hopeful about Jaden Ivey's ceiling than I am about Keegan Murray's. That's just where I am today on June 6th. That could change anytime, but today that's where I'm at.
Today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by BetOnline. They are your number 1 source for all your betting, stats, and sports information. You can find out all the latest sports developments, news, and odds, including this year's basketball championship matchup. Of course, it's happening right now. The Warriors and Celtics battling. You have the NHL Hockey Conference Finals, Major League Baseball, of course, the latest fighting news, MMA, UFC, boxing. All of that action is available for you on BetOnline. They're your continued source for all your sports wagering information, including live live betting, esports, and more. I have a lot of fun with prop bets and future bets on Bet Online. Like there are a ton of NFL futures out right now that you can enjoy if you're a football fan. And then Sacramento Kings fans, once we get that Kings schedule out, once we start getting those over-unders on Kings win totals for next year, there are going to be a lot of fun Kings futures for you to make money on as well. Of course, the Kings are going to be massive underdogs to win a championship. So make sure you put a few bucks down, because when they do win the championship in 2023, you're going to make a boatload of money. Let's cross our fingers with that. Whatever you bet on, make sure you head to the website today. Use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action at Bet Online, where the game starts. You said drafting potentially a 3 or a 4. What about Monte McNair drafting a 5? We've heard rumors that the Kings are interested in potentially moving up to number 2 and could aggressively be trying to move up to 2. Of course, swapping picks with the Oklahoma City Thunder in order to get Chet Holmgren, assuming that Jabari Smith Jr. is the number 1 overall pick, which seems to be, I'm not going to say set in stone, but the safest bet at this point in time. What do you think about the idea of, first, before we even talk about what the Kings would have to give up to get to number 2, let's just talk about Chet Holmgren. You got a 7-footer, checks a lot of boxes for what the Kings would need, especially next to Sabonis, can space the floor, protects the rim in a major way as a natural 7-footer. This is not meant to be an insult. It's meant to be a joke. He's barely heavier than I am, even though he's 5-6 feet taller than I am at 195 pounds. Like, there's obviously concerns with that, and rightfully so. But what do you think about the idea of Chet Holmgren in Sacramento? Is he the type of player that you think is worth the Sacramento Kings potentially giving up what it would take to move up even just 2 spots?
Yeah, that's one I've been flip-flopping on. I mean, if you'd have asked me 2 weeks ago, I would be very concerned about his weight. Like you mentioned, he's very slim. It's kind of like back when Kevin Durant was coming into the draft, and people always talked about on how the pro day, I think he couldn't bench press. I think it's like 145 pounds or 130 pounds. He couldn't he barely could get it up. Like he could not handle it. He's just not that strength isn't there for some of those guys. I've kind of turned on that a little bit because I've watched some of the film and I've read some of the scouting reports, and that he really just uses his length, and that's kind of what he does. Kind of like Rudy Gobert, but who has put on size over the years. But his length is what I really am looking at as far as his shot blocking ability, rim protection, which the Kings have not really had in a while. Rashawn Holmes did a pretty good job of being a rim protector last year, in 2020, 2021. But, obviously last season, that was kind of a lost season for Rashawn. And Sabonis by no means is a rim protector. He can hold his own in certain situations. We saw what he did with Jokic when they were battling, but you need someone down there to help him out. And I've come to kind of find that I would like the idea of having Chet Holmgren, a guy who can also space the floor. He can shoot the basketball. He can score. He is arguably the best defender in this draft. And I've heard from multiple people that he's the guy the Kings, that's our number 1 choice if he's there. Now, like you said, will they move up to do that? I don't know. That's going to be pretty pricey probably. And we know what OKC is doing up there and collecting future draft picks like Infinity Stones. So I don't know. I guess we're going to go over that in a second and what it would take to give it up for him. But if by some chance he fell to 4, that'd be incredible. I don't think it's going to happen though.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen at all. And look, if the Sacramento Kings had stayed at 7, I would say it was almost impossible that the Kings would be able to pull this off and move up to number 2. But even though they're at 4 and this 4 pick has tremendously high value, still just moving up 2 spots from 4 to 2 takes a lot more than I think people realize. I've heard conversation of, hey, would the Kings be willing to attach an unprotected future first rounder in order to move up to 2? Yeah, of course they would. It's going to take way more than that, in my opinion. I don't know how Oklahoma City says, yeah, you can have 2 spots and get the player that you want for us taking your 4th pick. We'll move back just to get 1 extra first-round pick. Like, as much as they're stockpiling draft picks, that doesn't make sense to me. I mean, I think the Kings are going to have to significantly pay more in order to get that. And maybe it is more draft compensation. Like you said, OKC collecting them, Sam Presti collecting them like Infinity Stones. How many more first-round picks do they want? I don't know. My question to you is, Frankie, if you're playing general manager, if you're trying to figure out what your max you're willing to give up in order to move up to number 2, you can include players, you can include draft picks. How all in are you going on the idea of Chet Holmgren and just moving up 2 spots?
I mean, I'm very interested in doing that. It's kind of I wish you could peel back the curtain a little bit, and we've seen reports as far as last week that Oklahoma City is interested in Jaden Ivey, and maybe they do look to shock the draft. And we've seen it happen before where people don't go in the order they're always supposed to go. Maybe Jaden Ivey does go too, but I'm sure Oklahoma City's not going to let the Kings know that they're going to pass on Chet Holmgren. They're going to try to get whatever they can from them, and we've seen a report also, I believe Sports Illustrated put it out last week, that the Kings have 3 players on their will not trade list, will not touch in trade talks. De'Aaron Fox, Sabonis, Davion Mitchell. So I don't want to move Davion Mitchell, but if Davion Mitchell in the 4 pick in I don't know, that's a lot to give up another unprotected first round pick, or one with protections like limited protections. That's a lot to give up for a rookie who you might not know is going to pan out. So um, I'm very much a believer that the 4th pick can bring you back a talent without having to give up a lot of leveraging future, like giving up a guard like Davion Mitchell, who was playing so well and is arguably the best defender on the team right now, and a first round pick a year or 2 from now when you're going to need it, especially if the Kings are losing and Domantas Sabonis leaves in free agency. You're gonna need that pick. So, as enticing as it is to move up to 2, I think the most I would probably give up is this year's 4th, and then maybe one more first round pick a year, maybe in 2024. That's the most I give up, just because of that very fact that I don't want to give up Davion Mitchell. I don't want to give up multiple first round picks when the Kings really could be in a situation in 2 years where they need that again, and then you lose your center that you give up Tyrese Halliburton for, which is very realistic. If the Kings aren't winning, Domantas Sabonis is not going to be here. I mean, I feel like he's made that pretty clear in the interviews he's given. Sam Amick, he had a nice interview during the season saying, like, I want to be a part of it here. I want to turn things around, but there's no guarantees. So I wouldn't give up much more than maybe 2 picks, this one included, to move up to 2, because there is a chance you might not even be having to move up. You might have to talk to Houston. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, so let's explore the significance of the Kings including Davion Mitchell in these trade talks. And really what jumps out to me is that would be back-to-back major trades that Monte McNair has pulled off by using the first 2 draft picks that he had as a general manager. First, Tyrese Halliburton in order to get to Domantas Sabonis. Now, Davion Mitchell to theoretically move up and get another draft pick that you really, really want. There are questions about, because Monte McNair is going into the last year on his contract and the Kings haven't extended him at this point in time. There's still plenty of time for them to do so. So it's not like they're saying you're not getting an extension unless the Kings win next year. But people are concerned that maybe there's some desperation from McNair. And I think there's pressure absolutely on McNair to perform in order to continue his position as a general manager in the NBA. But I could be wrong here. I don't know him personally. From my understanding of Monte McNair, I don't believe he would do anything so reckless and foolish enough to completely throw what against the wall, hope that it sticks, and if it falls apart, he's out of a job and the Kings are screwed 4 or 5 years down the road because all their draft picks are gone. Like, I'm pretty confident that if Monte McNair is willing to include first or future first round picks and Davion Mitchell in a hypothetical trade to move up to 2 to get Chet Holmgren or whoever the Kings want at the top of the draft. McNair is doing that move because he 100% believes that rookie at the top of the draft not only has superstar potential, but is going to be the guy to bring the Sacramento Kings to that next level. I believe that wholeheartedly. I'm not as concerned as some might be for McNair to make some kind of foolish all-in move, swing for the fences that could be catastrophic for the Kings down the road.
Yeah, I mean, no Pete D'Alessandro redos. We don't none of the Isaiah Thomas, Alex Oriaki stuff. I mean, that's going to set you back like that. I think that I'm right there with you. I have full trust in Monte McNair making the right decision here. Maybe it's not the. Well, let me backtrack. I have faith in him making having decent judgment in the situation, having good judgment in the situation, and not being reckless and not leveraging the future for years to come. I think he knows what he's doing. He's very calculated. The moves that he's made, maybe minus the Tristan Thompson trade, which I think that was probably his only blemish he's had so far, because DeLon Wright would have been great to have around.
Absolutely.
A guy I'd like to have the Kings look at this summer, by the way. I think that Monte McNair is more calculated than that. And when you look at even the trade that you can look at and say, okay, that was kind of a swing for the fences move, which was the Halliburton Sabonis trade. I think it's a trade that's worked out for both sides. And Sabonis has been great in Sacramento. Tyrese Halliburton's been great in Indiana. So if you can just get that right up, that one more right move, the big move, the Kings are going to be a good team. So I have faith he's not going to leverage their future to go draft Chet Holmgren. I have faith they're not going to package their picks and go trade for Bradley Beal or someone who's going to be a free agent in a year or two and going to cost you an arm and a leg. So I'm not worried about it. Like I'm really feeling okay. Like if some other people were in charge in the front office, I'd be a little afraid, but I have faith in Monty.
What is your philosophy around the value that the Kings need to get from a player who's drafted at number 4 overall? Like at number 7, I think we all would have been okay with if the Kings get a solid, consistent NBA starter who maybe never makes an all-star team, but is a good player on a playoff and maybe championship team. Like I think we all would have been okay with that. Maybe like, a Harrison Barnes type player, right? Just one of those really solid NBA starters that you never questioned really their position. You might question their role on a team, but you know that they're going to have a long career in the NBA and they can help good teams win games and win championships. At number 4, though, and there have been a lot of stars that have been taken at number 4 in the past, suddenly Kings fans are like, no, you absolutely have to swing for the fences. You have to go for the Ivy ceiling. You have to go for the Shaden Sharp ceiling and Shaden Sharp mystery over the maybe more safe known commodity of like a Keegan Murray, because you need that star at that 4 spot. What is your philosophy with that pick? Because the Kings moved up to number 4, do they need to go for a star? Of course, the Kings would love to have a star. Do they need to get a star with number 4, or are you okay with a solid playoff contributing starter that maybe doesn't have the ceiling of an Ivy like you've talked about?
Yeah. At where the Kings are right now and in the place they're at, and they had this, I won't call it a miracle, but the way they got to jump up to 4 again, you kind of have to be aggressive, and you have to, like Monte McNair said before, he always will draft the best player available regardless of position. It's kind of you draft him now and then you figure out the rest later situation. He said that in both drafts, when he drafted Tyrese Halliburton and when he drafted Davion Mitchell last year, because questions came up last season, last draft about you drafted another guard when you have 2 guards right there. Your two best players pretty much on the team are 2 guards, and you draft another one. So I think when you're at a position like the Kings are right now, you have to swing for the fences. If you believe, if Monte McNair in that front office believes the best player in this draft is Jaden Ivey, they're going to take Jaden Ivey. I mean, if they do think, we're not that high on him, if they could look back in the draft and see Keegan Murray there at 7, see AJ Griffin there at 6 range, maybe that's where a trade back happens, where they say, we're not too sure if Shaden Sharp is going to be a star in the NBA. We're not too sure if Jaden Ivey is going to be a star in the NBA. It's going to come down in the end to what they feel. I mean, what I feel is, I'm not in the general manager room, I mean the office here, but I do think there is some star potential in that area, whether it be Jaden Ivey. A lot of people are skeptical about Shaden Sharp. I also would wish that there was more on him to determine his true spot in this draft, and I'm very intrigued to see where he can go. He could go anywhere from the top 4 to maybe down to 10, 11, 12 range. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen to him on draft night. So the Kings are in a good spot. They're at 4th. Stars have been drafted at 4th. I mean, last year, Scotty Barnes, I would kill to have a player like Scotty Barnes on the Kings right now. So yeah, you got to go for it. This is no time to be frugal and safe at this point. I mean, there's too much riding on this right now. The Kings need to win. They need a big win. Otherwise, De'Aaron Fox is going to be gone in a couple years, Sabonis, and then we're back to who the hell knows where in a couple years. So scary situation, exciting, scary, but it's also kind of fun in a sick way.
No, I've said, I honestly feel this. If the Sacramento Kings and Monte McNair screw up this 4th overall pick, this playoff drought is reaching 20. I'm confident in that. And
I agree.
I said before, the Sabonis trade we thought was the entree. The Sabonis trade became the appetizer the night the Kings move up to 4. I'm not dismissing the Sabonis trade, saying that's less important than the 4th pick by any means, but that was part 1 of this all-in potential move for Monte McNair. This is going to decide his future, not just as a Sacramento Kings general manager, but maybe an NBA general manager, period. Like, you have 2 years and you're still attached to Domantas Sabonis. I firmly believe if Sabonis isn't back in 2 years, neither is Monte McNair. That's number 1. But number two is there's no way Sabonis returns if you don't do right by him, do right by the team, do right by winning basketball with this number 4 overall pick. This opportunity fell into your lap a couple times, fell into your lap with the 5th pick, moving up to the 5th pick. You got De'Aaron Fox out of it. He's still here, solid. Fell into your lap with number 2. It wasn't your fault. This was Vlade, completely botched it. Now, for the 3rd time in just a handful of years, the Kings have another opportunity fall into their lap. They can't afford to strike out and screw this one up. So there is pressure on Monte McNair in that sense, and I agree with you completely. If the Kings do not get this pick right, in my opinion, like they're going back into the cellar in the NBA, which some would say they're still there, and they could be there once again for the foreseeable future. So the
true cellar,
yeah,
like really. I'm talking like 20 wins. I mean, they won 30 wins, which, hooray, who cares? But I mean, it could get a lot worse around here. We all remember 2009. I mean, we could be seeing that again if those guys leave and we are left with nothing here. So yeah, I completely agree.
You reserve the right 100% to change your mind a million times before draft night. So nothing you say, nothing I say is, of course, set in stone here on June 6th. If Keegan Murray is the pick at 4, I'm elated. I'm celebrating. I think it's a great pick. If Keegan Murray is the pick at 4, are you feeling underwhelmed? Are you okay? Are you frustrated? If Jaden, let's say this top 3, right, is the what we expect, some combination of Jabari, Chet, Paulo. So Ivy's there, Sharp's there, Murray's there. The Kings go with Murray in that spot. What is your mood at this point in time?
I like Keegan Murray. So like I would be a little upset. I'd be a little bummed out they didn't go for a guy like Ivy. I mean, Ivy's a guy who I think has the best potential out of those guys right now. But I'd feel good that the front office has done a solid job of evaluating Keegan Murray. They've done a good job of evaluating draft talent, in my opinion. I mean, Tyrese Halliburton was great. Got him at 12. I mean, that was dumb of the other teams to let him go that far, but Kings jumped on it. And then Davion Mitchell, who didn't make any all-rookie teams and wasn't one of the top 10 rookies in the league last year, but the potential was there, and we saw it while he was in that starting role with De'Aaron Fox out at the end of the season. I feel good about. I'd feel confident in the Kings doing the right thing with Keegan Murray, because I do think he is a guy who I'm not sure if he can come in and be a starting power forward in day one, but he's someone I think that could be brought along into a very good player. I mean, he plays defense. He can shoot the basketball. He's athletic. He's a big body guy, like kind of like Harrison Barnes a little bit. I think they're both 6'8", over 215, 220. He's someone I would feel okay with. And I guess if I had to kind of put it into who would I be okay with the Kings drafting? Like who would I be happy about? I'd say I would put Jaden Ivey and Keegan Murray. Those are like the only 2 I'm kind of looking at right now. I mean, I'm looking at AJ Griffin. I know that surprises happen. I think all Kings fans last year expected Moses Moody to get taken at 9, who I still would have been happy with. I think he will be a good player too. But surprises happen. But if Keegan Murray goes 4, I've said it already, I will talk myself into whatever the Kings do. I'll try my best to talk myself into it. I want to be objective and look at it from all angles. But the fan deep inside of me wants this to work out so badly. I will try to find some positives to pull out of it. But I've been high on Keegan Murray since he was in the tournament, and if he goes 4, I think it just speaks to what the front office thinks of him, and I'm all for it. If they're that high on him, let's go. Let's roll it.
Last thing I want to chat with you about, and I mean, recently there is a belief, at least those who follow me, that I am no longer a fan of De'Aaron Fox and don't want De'Aaron Fox in Sacramento, and don't think the Kings should consider De'Aaron Fox for the future and for their decision in this draft pick. I completely disagree. Honestly, I 100% think that De'Aaron Fox needs to be taken into account with this draft pick. That's why I bring up the questions about fit with Jaden Ivey, because of where the Kings are at this point in time, because of that 2 essentially season window, win now window that they have in order to keep Domantas Sabonis at this point in time. So where are you at with, there are also some fans that say, look, you may have made the decision to take Bagley over Luka because of De'Aaron Fox and not wanting to take the ball out of Fox's hands. At least that was kind of fed to us a little bit by the Sacramento Kings at one point in time. Then maybe you decided to choose De'Aaron Fox over Tyrese Halliburton with this trade, and you chose, once again, Fox over another promising young player. there's some that say, I don't care if De'Aaron Fox doesn't work out with this draft pick. If you draft Jaden Ivey, he's really good, and Fox is struggling to fit with him at that point. Bye-bye Fox. Where are you at with that? Are you okay with the Kings taking someone who potentially doesn't fit with De'Aaron Fox and open to the idea of, if it doesn't work out, maybe the Kings move on from De'Aaron? Or are you more along the lines of, the Kings need to find somebody here that is going to work with De'Aaron Fox because that's the quickest path to the success Sacramento's looking for?
It's kind of I'm not going to sit on the fence and say I'd like both, like a player that could work out and I'll call us to replace. I think that's the ideal scenario, but I obviously think that I'd be remiss and I'd be naive if I said De'Aaron Fox is for sure going to be a Sacramento King for his whole career, if I know that for 100% certainty, because I don't. He wants to win here. He wants to be the player that turns this around. He said it before
many times.
He wants to be the player that turns this around, and I love that about him. I think that he is a very good player, and I want him to be a part of this thing when they turn it around. But that being said, I am not against them drafting a player like Jaden Ivey, even if he doesn't work out, because 2 years from now, the Kings can be in a very difficult position if they have not made the postseason. Because at that point, let me roll a scenario for you. 2 years go by, and De'Aaron Fox is still kind of not spinning his wheels. Like last year, he played very well after the Sabonis trade, but maybe pre-Sabonis trade, he's kind of spinning his wheels a little bit. The shot's still struggling, averaging 20 and 4. Sabonis just left and signed with the Lakers, yikes, or the Clippers. What do we do? The Kings might have to make a decision here. And they have Jaden Ivey, another guard who's playing decent, but maybe is now in a position to take over and have the offense be, he controls the offense. Maybe that's where the final straw comes. Maybe that's where it's time to finally move on. If the Kings aren't winning and Sabonis leaves, it's nice to have insurance. And as much as I do like Davion Mitchell, I don't see him the same kind of caliber player as De'Aaron Fox and what we expect Jaden Ivey to be. Davion Mitchell's a different kind of player. So I'm of the idea that I would take the risk and just hope they can work it out, because push is going to come to shove for one of them eventually. And I mean, signs point to it being the guy whose contract expires first. So that's the way it usually goes. So we'll see. We'll see. It's a scary situation. It's a gamble, but that's what you have to do at the 4th pick. It's too much of an opportunity to just let it slip through your fingers. So not again.
Well, believe it or not, I still do believe that De'Aaron Fox can be the star on this team. I still do believe that he and Domantas Sabonis can be a extremely dynamic duo, that the Kings now have the potential to add a really, really good rookie with the 4th overall pick too. That's what excites me, not someone coming in to replace De'Aaron Fox, although I hear exactly what you're saying.
I don't want that either. I hope they can work together.
Right.
Believe me.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what's the best case scenario for the Kings at this point. If the Kings draft a rookie that can work together with everybody here, that's the quickest path to success for Sacramento. And that's really what everybody should be working towards. But yes, I still think De'Aaron Fox is an absolute superstar here. And I still think that he can be the guy that leads the Kings now that he has Sabonis and hopefully a really good rookie alongside him. Frankie, will have to wait and see what the Kings do on draft night. I can't wait. I'm sure we'll change our minds, chat about it privately, publicly a million times. And then after the draft happens, we'll have you back on Locked On Kings. I'll hop on Return of the Roar. We'll do some kind of crossover and talk about whatever the Kings decide to do, because there are going to be a million ways to analyze it. And then we go through the long wait of, is it Summer League yet? it's that time of year, baby.
It's coming, man. But we're very close. It's crazy today. I thought about Thursday's 2 weeks. It's really right there. So it's almost over. I'm very much looking forward to just being able to have the players selected and we can start talking about fit scenarios, Summer League, because I'm getting kind of let's get rolling, man. Let's get draft day going.
Huge thank you to Frankie for joining me here on the Locked On Kings podcast. An absolute pleasure to have him on as always. A good friend of mine does tremendous work over at KHDK, and make sure you listen to the Return of the Roar podcast. He and Chris Watkins, who Chris is going to be joining me here soon on a future Locked On Kings podcast as well. They do phenomenal work over there. They're diving heavy, not just into draft coverage, but they're also looking back at last season, kind of performance evaluations for Kings players, and they're going to look at the possibility of which players should remain in Sacramento, which players Monte Monte McNair might consider heavily moving on from. They're covering all of that over on Return of the Roar podcast, plus more great content. So make sure you check out that great stuff. Also, we have an important favor to ask you here on Locked On Kings. I have a couple important favors to ask you. The first one is we've put together a survey so that we can learn more about listeners like you and make your favorites Locked On podcasts even better. Not just Locked On Kings, but maybe you're a Niners fan, Locked On Niners. Maybe you're a Raiders fan, Locked On Raiders, an A's fan, Locked On A's. This is your opportunity to tell us what you like and what you don't like about Locked On podcasts. Go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey right now to get started. It won't take very long, and everyone that completes the survey can qualify for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Ticketmaster gift cards. So take advantage of this audience survey right now. Help us out at lockedonpodcast.com/survey. Thank you so much for your help. And also, I am still doing that giveaway on Locked On Kings. If you help us get to 350 reviews on Apple Podcasts, and we're at like 330 something right now. So we're going to accomplish this goal, but we need your help to get there. Please go onto Apple Podcasts, hit 5 stars, leave a little blurb about what you like about the podcast, why you'd encourage others to listen to the podcast, even some constructive criticism. We're always there for, always down for it. Leave your honest review, your honest evaluation there. If once we get over 350 reviews, I will be buying a pair of opening night Kings tickets, and I will be giving them away. Lower bowl opening night Kings tickets inside the Golden One Center. I will be giving them away once we reach that goal. So help me accomplish that. I appreciate you. Thanks so much for getting through that weekend. I just got back from a golf trip in Carson City, Nevada, so I'm refreshed and ready for more Locked On Kings content. You best believe we're going to continue to hit this draft hard. A little over 2 weeks away from draft night. I'm very excited. I hope you are too. Thank you so much for tuning into Locked On Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.